Greetings everybody, Strategic Sage here. Time for another patch update. It's been about a month and a half. It was 2090 last time, we're up to 2127. And the alpha for multiplayer is coming out probably in about a week, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, but we are almost there on that for those interested in what's going to happen there. Just came back from Beta Branch with another build here. And there's been a fair number of things, little things, but added together, they make a significant difference over the last few weeks. So let's dive into some of those. One is if you just go into sort of a custom start here, let's go and add some factions. We can have multiple Zenith traders now, which is a thing that was not possible before. You could only have one. Now, one of the things that will happen with this, if you add a whole bunch of them, the AI will end up buying a bunch of stuff and it will get really crazy in terms of, like, if you want to deal with super fortified enemy planets, well, this is one way you can make that happen in a roundabout sort of way. If you like plotting through eyes and troop accelerators every other system, load up your game with a bunch of Zenith traders. Then we have a new scouting option. Hops for planets adjacent to yours are watched. Now, it gets a little iffy sometimes. People who wanted to scout more, but they didn't want to put up logistic stations or use hacking. People want to keep an eye on the Scourge, etc. I don't like using this. I like to use it sort of the way the game is designed. But there are situations where it can be real tedious to try to figure out what the AI is doing. And if you want to be able to do that, here we go. So this is up there. You can automatically up to 3 hops out from all of your planets. If they're explored, they will also be watched. This is a quick game I threw up just for purposes of demonstration. So if we advance forward a bit here, now I've done nothing here. I've just begun it and run the clock forward almost 20 minutes. And when we hit the 20-minute mark, we are going to get a little something from the game right here. Well, there's a wave. That's not really what I'm referring to. There it is. Okay, so this is called Reactive Guidance. And it'll spawn these pop-ups, and they're available later under the journal. And basically what this is you've gone, in this case, 20 minutes without building any turrets. It tells you, hey, maybe you should do that. Consider building some turrets to defend our planets. They're a strong mechanism of stationary defense, etc., etc. If you don't spend any science for a long time in the game, if you're just going through attacking a whole bunch of planets and constantly knocking out all the command stations and skywriting your AI progress, there's one related to that. So it's basically for new players to help you not bounce off the game as much. So I think that's a good thing to do. I hope they expand on that in the future, because making things more accessible could always stand to be improved. Now we also have this full metal thing going on up here. It'll give you an indicator if you're full on there. And then we know that if you left click, you're going to see your metal flows. If you right click on the metal, and this is temporary, they want to put it somewhere else as they can see this, it's experimental, but it will tell you how many of the various things you've killed and then how much metal they were worth. So that's another useful bit. Now there's a whole bunch of other things that have changed relating to some factions and some balancing and things of that nature. The human resistance fighters, they now have a structure that you can hack for a special ship line and 1,000 science. They attack less often, but in somewhat stronger amounts. And then also, they had these various sayings. They said, like, oh, sorry, warping out, etc. They would apologize even if they're leaving a winning battle. And they don't do that anymore. The Scourge, they have blockade running builders now that they do. A lot of people like to cut them off to prevent their expansion. It's generally considered the pro strategy against Scourge. Spread quickly, keep them from getting too much critical mass. So that's a Scourge way of fighting against that strategy a little bit better. The Dark Spire, they now have journal entries, and they also are more aggressive about expanding and planting more Loki throughout the galaxy, which is kind of scary to me. We'll interestingly see how that works. But for example, here is the Dark Spire first detected. You can also see these are some of the other Reactive Guidance ones. But here's the first Dark Spire entry. It says, we're detecting some major new structures. We're calling the Dark Spire. Vengeance generators seem to be drawing power from the deaths of nearby units. we must be wary about fighting on those planets. So they are gradually starting to fill things in a little bit more with these journal entries that you can see on the various factions, and Darkspire was the next one to get thrown in there. Dyson Sphere now scales up a lot better. It gets more income with AI progress rising. If you hack the max strength thing to increase its power, it will also increase the mark level of the ships it produces, which is huge. They don't stay at Mark 1 through the whole game now. And there's also been improvements to the defending logic. Ion cannons, they are a lot more relevant now. They had a couple weaknesses before. If a ship had shields, they couldn't kill it outright with one shot. They would have to like knock down the shield and then hit it with a second shot to destroy the hull. They couldn't kill more than one ship in a stack. They can now do that. So they've been upgraded to sort of make them make a little more sense and be more powerful compared to the initial settings that they had. Melee ships got a big quality of life and effectiveness increase, something that I've personally been asking for a long time. Was really excited about this being added. If you put them on attack move, the little X that appears down here if you're controlling a fleet, ships and the orders there, they will have what used to be called a target seek range. Basically, you can put them into a cloud of ships or a particular area on a system, and they will automatically attack any hostiles that are nearby. As opposed to before, you pretty much had to put them onto pursuit or target them against one specific big structure or ship. And so they're a little bit more self-starting, self-motivating now, you might say. Makes them a lot easier to use. And then there are the eyes. And this is a temporary placeholder fix, but I think it's going to be fairly unpopular. It's definitely an implementation that I do not like. And the eyes now, like originally it was more than 2 fleets will trigger them, and that caused some issues. You could circumvent that with the outguard. You could circumvent that to a certain extent by just throwing in like a lone spire frigate, for example, which allows for massive amount of strength in just the one fleet. And then when they changed the ship lines to being virtually unlimited, 40 of them in a fleet, now all of a sudden you don't have to worry about them very much. You rarely would want to have more than 2 fleets in a system. So what they've gone to now is something that's fairly similar to Classic. And you can see from the tooltip here, strength of AI opposed units, it will be alerted. Now that does have the benefit is that it can be alerted by minor factions if you have allied Scourge or Marauders or whatever. I like that part of it. But the problem with the strength trigger is that it essentially punishes you for fighting well. Like, you have to evacuate your ships, because really what you're going to need to do to handle this properly is you're going to need to have 3 fleets. 2 in this system and 1, say, in an adjacent system. And then as the AI strength here goes down, the amount of ships that you can have without alerting the eye also goes down. So you've got to switch some of your ships to a different fleet and then evacuate that fleet to the neighboring planet where you've got another flagship waiting, and then switch the ships from the one fleet that evacuated to the other one that's just hang out there, go back in, evacuate some more ships. Or you can hack it, or you can just have, a big enough fleet to survive that damage for a short amount of time and finish up conquering the system. But there's no good, smooth way to deal with it. I think it's going to be very wonky and annoying and tedious to work with. So I'm hoping they revisit it. I've put up some ideas on the Mantis, but it's likely to stay this way at least until the Zenith Onslaught DLC and multiplayer do come out. There's a lot of good stuff in these patches. I'm not overall negative at all, but I really am not a fan of that particular eye change. So that's where AI War 2 stands as of now. If I can figure something that works, I'm going to try to do some sort of this is how multiplayer works video in the future. And I'll be back with more patch updates as they are warranted. If you want to know what the specifics are on where multiplayer stands, link to the patch notes in the description below, where Arkin keeps all that updated on the wiki. Otherwise, thanks for watching, everybody.